In studio, SABC News political editor Mzwandile Mbeje now joins us. We're talking about issues closer to home. Political parties obviously on their final rallies, campaigns wrapping up. We're edging closer to the 29th of May. Mzwai, good morning. Thanks for joining us at this hour.
A very good morning to you and the viewers.
Talk us through what we can expect. I mean, hours, days, edging closer.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's crunch time. What are the trends emerging?
Well, in the next, is it 1.5 weeks?
11 days.
Yes. What South Africans here at home will be doing is exactly what South Africans abroad are doing. Yes. So that's when they will exercise their right to choose the government of their choice. And then, of course, the parties are out there in full force trying to win the hearts and minds of South Africans. In fact, we have the rallies, we have the manifestos, even as we speak today, to try really and influence how we should vote as South Africans. I think one of the interesting things perhaps that South Africans would want to see happen today is, what is it, a party like MK, which is launching its manifesto at Orlando, what is it that it will offer differently? Remember, it's led by the former president, who has had the opportunity to lead when he was still the leader of the ANC, but now that he's leading his own entity, so what is it that he's going to offer differently? We already know they would want to scrap the constitution, they wanted 2/3, but of course that you have to do if you then have the power, or rather people will be able to vote for you. So whether that will be possible is anyone's guess. Yes. And then of course, also interesting, Lizelle, we have the former Secretary General of the ANC, quite interesting, Ismail, also launching his party, the ACT. I think for me, why it's so important or interesting is that you have the recent leaders of the ANC who are now running their own entities, obviously for different reasons. I mean, former President Zuma actually occupied all positions in the top 6 then, obvious but one, that is the Treasurer General. Remember, he was at some point Deputy Secretary General, then that will include the Secretary General's office. So he occupied all of those, and then he's now having his own entity. The Ismail, the recent Secretary General as well. So you have the leaders of the ANC, I mean, going with their own parties. So how much will that impact on the current voter base of the ANC? So obviously it's anyone's guess. Yes, there may be a bit of impact as well because they will have a bit of a chunk from the ANC, but will it be sufficient to bring it under 50? I'm not sure.
Well, we obviously playing with an imaginary crystal ball of sorts at this point, looking at the dynamics and some of the trends and what we can expect from the manifesto launches. The final rallies also happening. You've got the big parties, you've got obviously your independent candidates as well. What's happening on that end as we edge closer from this weekend, in fact?
You know, it's been a very interesting election, this one. Remember, we've had the issue of independence, and we've never known at a national and provincial level, we have never known how, for example, to cover the independence, because it's a new phenomenon until the court intervened to say, no, independence must also be allowed. So it's going to be very interesting. I think that's one aspect we'll be looking out for when that voting happens. Will South Africans respond to the independence, or they will still decide to stick with the established parties? And then, of course, looking ahead to particularly next week, where the big parties, by saying the big parties, I'm talking because that's evidence, I'm basing it on their representation in parliament, the ANC, the DA, EFF and IFP, so they will have their closing rallies. And interestingly, the ANC, which is the governing party, will have its closing rally here at FNB. So it's a show of force, and then of course to try and win the hearts and minds of the people. And then the DA will also have its final rally here in Gauteng, in Benoni. So, you know, they have an interest in effecting some sort of change in the province. And the third biggest, the EFF, will be in Polokwane as well, and they are hoping the Reds will come out in full numbers. So you know the IFP has already said they have ambitions of reclaiming KZN, and then they are taking their final rally to Richards Bay. So it will be very interesting really to see. But it's not only them, it is also almost all of the parties, big and small and independents, will be in their final push really this week. because beyond Sunday, so remember there's a calling off period, so they can't go with the big ones. So actually Sunday the 26th is effectively, in terms of the big rallies, the last one. And I'm sure they'll just do door to door here and there to try and change people. But yeah, that's where we are.
But I'm looking at the dynamics unfolding because we've seen, some arguably populist rhetoric and tendencies emerging ahead of elections. Some of the issues that have been, that have come to the fore on that front. What do you make of those dynamics unfolding, politicking as well? I wonder how this influences investors, confidence at large. So talk to us about those dynamics.
Well, I think the investors in this instance, they take a step and just watch and see what happens. But remember, they may have their own wishes, but they know that the final decision is held by South Africans. Whoever South Africans choose, they will have to work with that one. I mean, you can't simply because I don't like Lizelle, so and then she's employed at the SABC, then I walk away. So that's my loss. So they will have to work with whoever gets elected. Of course, they would have their own preferences. So what is happening now, obviously, I mean, we saw the donations yesterday, which was very interesting to see who is funded by who. 100%. And then you can see that there's a particular pattern really that has come out to say particular parties. In fact, I saw a lot of parties, I think parties like Action SA, DA, I think RISE, IFP, so you'd find that they are funded by more or less the same person. But of course, I'm not going to only restrict those because even the ANC, for example, someone like Patrice Motsepe is funding just about all those parties as part of contributing to the democracy. And I guess they'll probably advance the same argument.
Yeah, and absolutely. And Mzwai, speaking about, the information that's also circulating, you've got to caution against disinformation and misinformation as well, which is something we're obviously, trying to dispel. Talk to us about what you're witnessing on that and how it's also been managed this time round. Just caution against misinformation, disinformation, given the era of social media and the rhetoric. Yeah,
I mean, living in the era of social media, which is it's a plus in one way, but some people do use it very negatively, particularly with this AI stuff. Where people just generate fake news, and then someone will actually take that for real when it's just being fake. But I think on the whole, when you look at the campaigning, I don't think there's been anything really out of the ordinary in terms of changing the minds or throwing huge confusion to, let's say, to the voting public. Yes, there will be instances here and there which would be misleading, but on the whole, I think South Africans have been able, through platforms like the SABC, be it television, radio, our online platforms, where people have been able really to listen to what we are saying in terms of projecting that message directly to them. So when we do the rally, whether it's the governing party or the opposition or the small party, so people have been able to listen for themselves and decide for themselves. It's not always something that is being generated elsewhere, which is misinformation. Yes, there will be those who will create some sort of misinformation, but it has not played a bigger part, particularly in our coverage. I think we've been able really to hold that quite properly, yes. All
right, so thank you for painting that picture. I know that the work is in full swing here. We're wishing you all the best. You're bringing us the latest here on SABC and managing that, of course.